This is your Form 4 Mathematics Part 1, okay? So, the first chapter is about fungsi dan persamaan kuadratik dalam satu pemboleh ubah. So, functions in English is function and quadratic equations in one variable. Okay, so this is Chinese. So here, this is an example of a parabolic motion. Okay, so it is related to the quadratic equation. So the importance of quadratic equation is listed here. Now, so fungsi kuadratik banyak digunakan dalam bidang sains, perniagaan, sukan dan sebagainya. So in English, quadratic functions are widely used in science, business, sports, and so on. So for quadratic equations, the first thing is you have to identify, memastikan, okay, sesuatu ungkapan itu, okay, mempunyai only satu pemboleh ubah. Dalam case A, pemboleh ubah ialah X. Okay, so X kuasa 2 berdepan dengan X kuasa 2 biasanya ialah 1. So, satunya biasanya tidak dituliskan dalam ungkapan. So, 1, 4 dan 1 sini ialah what we call pemalah, constants. Okay, X square and X here is the pemboleh ubah or the variable. So, in any quadratic equations, you hanya mempunyai satu pemboleh ubah. Okay, that is only one variable, so that is X. So the highest power of X should be power of 2. So here you can see at the section A here, ungkapan pertama, you have X square, ungkapan kedua, X square, ungkapan ketiga, that is C, you have X square, ungkapan keempat, that is D, you have X power 1. So D is not a quadratic equation because the highest power is 1 only. So 5x plus 4, we call it as a linear equation, a straight line equation. And then part E, 3x squared, where x squared is a variable, so satu pemboleh ubah. Okay, so that is x squared with the highest power is 2. So part E is a quadratic. Part F is also a quadratic where the highest power is 2, okay, and is only one pemboleh ubah, one variable. So part G is not considered as a quadratic expression or quadratic ungkapan quadratic is because the highest power of the variable or the pemboleh ubah is power 3. Okay? So, dalam seni bina pula, kita sering melihat binaan melengkung berbentuk parabola. Parabola in Chinese, we call it as 抛物线, yang sebenarnya amat berkait rapat dengan penguasaan konsep. Okay, the concept of quadratic. Okay, you have parabolic motion. So this is called a parabolic motion. Okay, or 抛物线. Okay. So in architecture, we often see parabola-shaped curve construction which are actually closely related to the mastery of quadratic concept. So for this, what I have tabulated here, okay, you have the difference between ungkapan kuadratik, persamaan kuadratik, and fungsi kuadratik. In English, you have quadratic expression, quadratic equation, and quadratic function. The difference between the three is when you look at ungkapan quadratic or quadratic expression, you don't have an equal sign that appears, okay, on this in the expression. We call them as expression 1, 2, 3. These are examples, okay? So wherever you put equal to 0, it will be changed to persamaan quadratic, which we call also in English is quadratic equation. So you can see equals to 0, equals to 0, equals to 0. That is called an equation. Okay, so it is listed here in Chinese. So fungsi kuadratik or quadratic function, then you will have f function of x. So this fx here stands for function of x, bergantung kepada x, relies on x. What it means by this function of x means that it is relying on x or bergantung kepada x. So when the x is 1, so what we can do is substitute 1 to the x, substitute 1 to the x of this equation here. So it becomes 1 squared and plus 4 times 1 plus 1. So if, let's say, for example, I change the x to a 2, so you have 2 power of 2 plus 4 times 2 plus 1. So it will give you a different image or a different answer as compare when you have x equals to 1, then x equals to 2, then you have x equals to 3, and so on, or even negative values. Okay, so that is what it means by function. So for the second section here of this slide, you can see, okay, the questions is asking us for the bentuk graph, the shape of the graph. Okay, the shape of the graph. Now the shape of the graph can be determined by the value of the pemala. That means the constant. The pemala or the perkali is always the number in front of the variable, in front of the pemboleh ubah. So x is the pemboleh ubah here. So the constants or the pemala for this is 1, and for this is 4, and this one is 1. Okay, with only one variable, highest power is 2. So if let's say, for example, you look at this ungkapan here or this expression here, the constant in front of the x squared is a 1, or a positive 1. What I mean is a positive 1. So if it is a positive 1, then the shape of the graph, bentuk graph, okay, you will have to refer to a smiley face. If it is positive in front of the x square, it's always a smiley face. If there is a negative sign in front of the x square, let's say for example f and c, you have a negative sign in front of the x square. That is, in this case, is -2 and also -2 here. So it will appear as the bentuk graph or the shape of the graph will be a sad face. Okay, not a smiley face. Smiley face is only when the sign in front of the highest power variable is positive. You have smiley. Okay, sad face is when you have a negative constant in front of the highest power variable, that is x squared, is negative. Now coordinate, that means what is coordinate? Coordinate is a pair of value which is given for x and y in order to locate a point. A point it is that is within the graph. Okay, within the graph. Coordinate titik paling rendah atau paling tinggi. It depends on whether is smiley curve or is a sad curve. Sad is negative. Positive, that is smiley face, is positive here. So positive or smiley face, you always have titik paling rendah, the minimum point. Okay, with -2 x squared, the negative sign here, that means your bentuk graph is a sad face. Sad face is always, okay, represented, or it will be shown in the graph as having a titik which is paling tinggi. So the minimum point, paling rendah, titik paling rendah is the minimum point, and titik paling tinggi is the maximum point, as we have done in the exercise. So you can refer back to the exercise, okay, smiley and sad face, and how to locate the titik paling rendah and the titik paling tinggi. That is the minimum point and the maximum point. Remember, when you refer to this curve here, this sketches here, this sketch here, you can see this lengkongan here, the lowest, you can see this one, it is deflecting downwards, melengkung ke bawah. So therefore, it will give you a minimum point. And when you refer to this curve here, that is the sad face, melengkung ke atas, it always gives you the maximum point. Okay? So these are the keywords that you need to remember. So both of you remember to memorize all these okay, pinyin or Chinese characters here, the Chinese meaning of the key terms that I have shown here. Now, so I have shown you here. This one, you can even draw it as, okay, graph, okay, to determine whether it is smiley or it is a sad face, okay. So I have worked out from A to G here on this section here, where you can see I have given x value for this equation. I've given x value -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, or and 1. And x value here can always be referred to as the object and y as to be the image. Object is always the input value, y is always the output or the answer. So if let's say I replace this x here with a -5, so you have -5 power 2 plus -5 power 2 means you have to take bracket of the whole -5, then you power 2. Then plus 4 times -5 plus 1, you get a 6. If you put a -4, then you have the -4, the whole -4 power 2 plus 4 times -4 plus 1, so you get a 1, and so on. So what you need to do is you need to substitute your -5, replacing all the x here, okay, -4 replacing all the x, -3 replacing all the x, -2 replacing all the x, -1, 0, and 1. So you will get all your images here that range from 6, okay, to -3, okay. So quadratic equations always refers to as many to one. If you have studied pemetaan in Form 2 and Form 3, if you have any problem with pemetaan, you can refer back to me. So this is the second one, that is B, the same thing. You substitute all your x value into the equation, that means into the expression, that means for the x, -3 whole -3 power 2, so +9. Remember, negative times negative is positive, positive times positive is positive, negative times positive is negative, and negative times positive is also negative. So you substitute each of the x into the expression or ungkapan to get all your y values here. Then you go ahead with C, D, E, F, and G, which I have shown you here. So with all these tabulated values, which I have shown you here, okay, you can draw graph which I've shown you here. So when you refer to this, this is smiley because you have positive x squared or positive 1x squared. This is positive positive 2, so that is smiley. Positive 3 is also a smiley. So -2 is a sad face. This one is positive x squared, smiley. This one is linear, so that's why it appears as a straight line, a linear equation. This is a linear equation, but then we don't call it as linear equation. We call it as ungkapan linear expression. Unless it is equals to 0, then we call it as equation. Okay, so here you have x cubed plus 1, so this is cubical line or cubical form curve.